Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Marissa Kozlov. It's great to have you with us for today's eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and martech. Together, we'll learn how integrating first and third-party data can offer a complete view of your customers, enhance marketing efforts, and deliver personalized experiences that drive business results. So now let's meet my guest from Epsilon. We have Gillian MacPherson, Vice President of Data Product Management, who's joining us today from Toronto. Gillian, nice to see you.
You too, Marissa. Thank you.
You're welcome. And we also have Greg Cardone, Senior Director of Data Strategy and Analytics, who's in Denver today. Hi, Greg.
Hi, good afternoon.
Really happy to have both of you with us today. And also, I just want to remind our audience to use the chat window on the right. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. And also, of course, if you have any questions for our guests, we'll do our best to get to as many as possible during the Q&A. So please keep those questions coming. Now, let's move on to that great content we have planned. Gillian, over to you.
Thanks so much, Marissa, and welcome, everybody. Great to have you here on a Monday afternoon. It's beautiful here in Toronto, so I hope it is the same for you. Greg and I are here today to cover off a few things, really around the power of first-party and third-party marketing. What we want to cover off today is how can brands build the best foundation of their own first-party data? How to complete the view of every customer with our third-party data in partnership with your first-party data. How can that drive smarter decisions for you? And we're going to illustrate all of these with 3 different case studies of different clients and verticals that we've worked with to help bring it to life for you. So to start, setting the foundation. Here's an example that we've seen with a lot of different clients that we've worked with brands. And I'd be curious to see if people can look at their own first-party data to see this, where you can have a lot of different data points about a customer and different records, but do you really know that they're actually the same person? In this particular case, we have 3 different records. One has an email, one has an email and a phone number, and another has an email and an address. When working with clients, what we're able to do is be able to let them know, hey, all of these individuals that you have as individual records are actually the same person. It's all Jane Smith. Not only can we let you know how to consolidate all of these different touch points within your first-party data, but also add incremental touch points as well, as you can see what we were able to do for this particular record. Overall, we recognize the power of first-party data for a brand. It's the foundation for how you can go to market, and especially this day and age, there's so much that can be done with that data, but setting it and getting it right is really, really important. Firstly, what we like to do when working with clients, or we recommend a client does, is that piece we just talked about. How can you look at all of these different records and touch point and clearly consolidate that down to a single record, or the golden record as we like to call it? That's step 1. Step 2, make sure you cleanse all the data that you have on a consumer. You don't want to have an outdated address or potentially a phone number, and ensure that it's as up to date as possible. Lastly, fill in the gaps. Using first-party data these days, activation is critical. So the more contact points you have enables you to bring those records onto different platforms and channels more effectively. One thing I also like to point out, when you set this foundation properly and accurately, what it also enables you to do is build out lookalike modeling from that to find your next best customer. So it serves an additional purpose as well. So with that, Greg, we've obviously worked with a lot of different clients with regards to helping them out. Can you share an example of how we've worked with a client to help set this foundation for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Gillian mentioned, with a lot of clients, they come to us with lead gen efforts as it relates to financial services, insurance, direct-to-consumer brands. A lot of these types of clients are doing these types of initiatives to try to drive leads in-house, but also dealing with data that is incomplete in nature, as we talked about. In the case of this financial institution, their objective was to take their leads and be able to better prioritize them by more effectively identifying who they were. And so what we were able to do is use the names, emails that they were capturing within their leads to complete them as an individual, to put a name behind what the data is that they were capturing. And then working further with our analytics team, we developed an equation to effectively score and rank the leads as it relates to what the client's objectives were, so that they can identify these leads in real time, but then also prioritize them for their field agents to then bring these conversations to life and also make them as relevant as possible.
That's great. Have you seen anything else that's really helped clients, like by doing this? How has it helped their business?
Yeah, outside of this example, I think one of the most common things is around overall marketability from an onboarding and matching standpoint. When we're able to complete the records, clients oftentimes will bring these data sets into platforms or across any channel of activation. And with more complete data equals a better match, equals a better outcome in market.
Well, it's great, especially with like something like social. I mean, the more of your clients that you can reach directly, I would think the better.
Yeah.
So we set the foundation. That's the main thing we want to do with for client data. After that, what I'd recommend people to look at is your own first party data. It's incredibly powerful. You get a lot of information on your customers with regards to spend, visits, whether that be to website or in store, engagement with the brand, reaction to marketing that you do. It's a lot of really powerful data. But it only gives really a singular view of your customer, more so in terms of just how do you interact with them and how do they interact with you. There's a lot of incremental information that can be learned about customers that is very powerful in terms of how to market to them more effectively. How you can look at that is there's the foundational piece of who she is, in this example, demographics, income, et cetera. But then you can get even deeper into what a consumer cares about and also what they buy. This can really give a better view with regards to how to segment your customers, but also personalize. Here's just an example of how data can be used. If you started with these two individuals, one would think we were the same person. So great foundational information to know where they sit in terms of that they're female, they're 34 years old, they're married, and they have children, which at first blush could be just really what you think about them, that they're the same person in essence. But when you add incremental layers of data around a little bit more depth to their lifestyles, their hobbies, their interests, as well as what they buy, you can see they're actually very different people. On the left side, you can see there's an individual who likes to shop at Kroger. They have a minivan and they donate to animal causes. Whereas the individual on our right-hand side, she's a little bit more premium. She shops at Nordstrom and Whole Foods. She drives an Audi. And she happens to like Starbucks and PF Chang's. So it adds a lot more depth with regards to what you know about the customer and what they do outside of their interaction with you and your own first-party data. So Greg, as we start to work with clients, like what could somebody do as a way to start to see if adding incremental data over their own is really of any value to them?
Yeah, absolutely. As Gillian said, it really starts with taking the client's data and offering to bring that file in, running it through our comprehensive analysis across hundreds of data points to give them a deeper understanding of who their audience is from a foundational standpoint and how they spend their time and spend their money. So in the case of this client here, we're calling them, a leading fintech company. They're looking to understand who their current customers are, as well as the platform users that they currently are offering services to. So we brought that data in and we were able to really dig in and provide them with a tremendous amount of insights. So I'll start here with the data that we're looking at here. And when we do this comprehensive analysis, we call it a profile report. We're going to give basically 2 bits of data across every single data point that we have in this analysis. It's going to be a percentage, which would represent a match rate as to how well the customer's data matches against that particular data point, as well as an index. And the index is a number that, as you can see here, that is going to show the likelihood of that record being that particular thing as it relates to the total marketable US population through the lens of Epsilon, with 100 index being debt average to the general U.S. consumer. So for the example here of company A, in this story, one would glean, as well as the customer, that you can see they're typically more female, they're typically single, they have a general age that skews a bit younger, and there are children present of all age, but because of the younger age of the individual, it tends to be a bit younger than average.
So it seems to me like kind of what we talked about a couple slides ago, this is just setting that, hey, where are they at from a demographic and a life stage perspective, that initial foundation. And then I imagine we start to go a little deeper.
That's right. That's right. And then to continue that foundation, oftentimes where they are in their lives, you can see here, taking a piece out for education, it's going to show, potentially how much school has been completed. Are they potentially still a student, which our data also helps to provide, as well as their living situation. Are they a renter versus owner? How likely are they to be one versus the other? And the type of dwelling unit that they call home. In this case, their customers are a bit more from a renting side versus owning, and more likely to be found in an apartment or a multi-unit dwelling situation. Digging a bit deeper past demographics, once that foundation is set, then we start to get more into the financials. And this impacts all industries because it really gives that more complete picture of where their customers or where their audience is, rather, as it relates to current income situations, what their financial portfolio looks like. And we provide a number of financial models that depict this. As you can see here with income and discretionary income for that matter, it's going to show a range and where their customers or where your customers fall into those ranges respectively. In this case, for company A, their current customers are a bit more on the lower end of income, as well as discretionary income. And oftentimes, when we see these two metrics next to each other, income and discretionary, they typically are a little bit more mirrored in comparison, as you know, discretionary income being more of what's left over after the bills are paid. So these are pieces that we're gleaning and providing back to this current customer. Two more models that I wanted to showcase here, and that really starts to unpack the financial view a bit deeper, is around net worth and value score. Now, net worth, as we describe it, is going to be the overall wealth that your customer has accumulated over time. And why this is important here for a lot of clients is, I think about more in the world of, possibly like a cruise line or the travel industry or a high-end retailer or automotive, for example, where the ticket items are a bit larger in nature and where income and discretionary income aren't necessarily going to detect when an individual is of the age of being retired, where they're not making an income, but still have accumulated a great deal of wealth over time. Net worth is going to give us that. And in this case, for company A, this audience is a bit lower on the end of net worth, but for other industries or clients, you may see the inverse of this. And then lastly, with value score, this is a very powerful financial model that gives us the ability to understand the customer's marketability and furthermore, how likely they are to pay back their debt or pay back their balances in a timely manner. Again, dealing with more retail, automotive, anywhere where there is going to be that instance of some sort of like payment style or overall ability to provide those types of services. This gives the customer a sense of how stable they are from a financial perspective.
Well, it's interesting because it's really like 4 different slices to get the total picture of financially of where somebody stands, which is kind of like, hey, you start with their income, what's the potential they can spend? Discretionary is how much have I got left over after I've paid all my bills? And then as you look more at like your net worth and your value score, this ties to, well, how much have you saved or how many assets did you have? Where income, and I think discretionary income may not really be as much of an indicator potentially of what they're able to spend.
Yeah, absolutely. And we get into, these dig a bit deeper, and we get into more like generational wealth scenarios and things of that nature. But it does to help really drive that overall depiction of who the customer is that they're dealing with and help them to better understand from a marketing and go-to-market perspective.
Well, and interesting, I mean, this was a FinServ client, so obviously you would assume this would be very valuable information for a financial services client. But I like your points with regards to like a travel or a retailer or even auto, where understanding all of these elements is important to how valuable of a client they could be and what they're able to afford.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think we go a little deeper and get out of just our finances and our demographics.
Yeah, and this is where it starts to really round out and take shape as it relates to insights. For company A, what you're looking at here is what we call our propensity models. And what this is by far and away our biggest data dimension within the Epsilon data set. And it's going to give the customer, you, a greater level of detail into your current consumers as to how they spend their time, what do they care about, what are their hobbies, things of that nature. And as it relates to this deeper analysis that we're doing here, it's going to glean and really start to fine tune what that go-to-market strategy is, how to better relate to your customers outside of the household composition and financial status that they're currently in, to really bring that marketing or that data science to life. So in the case of company A, we learned that while their income levels are a bit lower, they are a gig economy employee. So they are looking for those extra income or streams of income that are available out there, but also cord cutters. These in socially active customers. These are insights that you as a client of Epsilon can use to better inform your marketing and go-to-market strategies, and messaging around that. And while we provide the high ranking, the low ranking, on the contrary, can be just as valuable. I highlight here likely to have a mortgage. We learned that earlier by the data expressing that they are not likely to be owners and are more likely to be renters. And that's what's coming through here, just as kind of a point of validation, but also they're not really into pro sports. And so this could be, any brands looking for any type of partnership opportunity, things of that nature. They really can understand like what's going to appeal to their current customers.
Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of has twofold, both of which you kind of mentioned a little bit here. A, like, how do I go to market? How do I find these people? So if I'm looking at this and I see cord cutters and I see I'm not interested in pro sports, I think that knocks out a lot of cable TV advertising if that was on scope. But definitely, social, great way to reach these people, or specifically CTV streaming. I would suspect if they're a cord cutter, that's where they're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we reviewed one. I think if I recall, you said this with this example, it wasn't too far off base of what the client was expecting when they had sort of an initial idea of whom they thought their consumer was. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think from the first half, it really helped them, potentially validate some points that they had in mind, but also obviously with the market, with the propensity models, it's going to give them a deeper, a more full picture, if you will, of who their shoppers are or their customers are.
That's great. And I think we're going to hop to another example, which is different vertical, so retail, but also where the client, our customer, had one idea and it actually turned out to be a little bit different in terms of who this particular subsegment was of their customer base.
Yeah, and we see this pretty often. In this case, this is a high-end retailer, but we see this across the board with many industries where they may do some of the legwork themselves internally, or they work with a third party to help them define their current customer base and maybe even bucket them out or segment them out into different types of customers, if you will. In the case of this retailer here, we worked with them to help them substantiate what the work that they had done and possibly show them that they're on the right path, or help them possibly pivot or challenge what some of these preconceived notions were. And through this exercise with this retailer, or in this example, we did unpack it a bit further and gave them more perspective to really bring to the table, to provide on top of the work that they've already done. And so what we looked at before, you have your more standard demographic building blocks around, we have gender, marital status, age levels, and presence of children. I think of this as the household composition, if you will. And what we were able to provide to this retailer is that your audience is more likely to be male, or like much more often rather than female. They're definitely married, or more likely to be married, I should say. than they were expecting, both on both fronts. But then also the age piece. With this retailer, the brand definitely appeals to a younger audience, at least the way that they perceived it. But here we're basically telling them that yes, you do have younger audience members there, but the skew is a bit more middle-aged. And there are children present and across all fronts, but we're showing a higher age children present in the household, which when you look at the data really starts to make sense if they are more likely to be married and come with a more middle-aged status, that the children aspect really starts to make sense.
Interesting. So a little bit different from what they were thinking and completely different from the financial services client, if I might add.
Yes. And with this retailer having a more premium product, looking at financials against the data or against their current customer file, there was no surprise here that income levels, discretionary incomes, and net worth were all skewing to be higher. This is an affluent audience, it's an affluent product. But what we were able to provide them is, yes, the income and discretionary income respectively were higher, but the averages were actually higher than they were earmarking it or where they were considering it to be, which gave them a bit more of a perspective on overall spending power as well as net worth. And that's something that as Gillian mentioned with the previous client, that you can see here the inverse, the trajectory of where this audience is from an overall wealth perspective is much higher, and even higher, more so than where the brand was expecting it to be.
And then we get to the good stuff.
Yeah. And so with that higher level of wealth or purchasing power, you can see here, the validation of the categories where they spend their money. Across the board, we're seeing an over-index in every purchase category. When you have high levels of discretionary income, general income, as well as net worth, this audience, your customers, have the money to spend and they are spending it. Where we're giving more perspective is where they're spending it. Maybe, kitchen and bath, they could be more interested in remodeling or high-end female apparel. It's going to be indexing across the board. With higher levels of income comes higher level of purchasing power. But this is going to give you an idea of where they're spending their money from a category perspective. And then as we looked at before, from a propensity standpoint, this audience, there weren't a whole lot of surprises from some of the more general activities of what an affluent audience would be particularly interested in. But when you take the data that we've learned up to this point, you start to really, look through and analyze, you start to understand that this audience has the money. They're looking for the opportunity to have an experience with the brand. They're very brand loyal. The brand affinity is going to be higher, and they're a very active audience. They're very much into travel and looking for those types of adventures and experiences from a vacation standpoint. What they are not interested in is really anything that is really driven by low price. That's not as much of an impact for them, or not much of an interest. And so you can see when you have that data, and when you start to bring all the components together, it really starts to shape up how you go to market, how you relate to these brands, knowing they have children in household of older ages. Maybe they can pass this passion on to them, and that the marketing and the materials really start to show that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Looking at this, I see a couple of things. One, to your point, how can you kind of bring in some of the passions that they have to the collateral and potentially partnerships in terms of how they're going to market. But also, given these tend to be their prime client is married, they have a higher income, and I'm seeing here the female likes to shop. I guess depending on their product mix, but it could be an interesting cross-sell opportunity to say, hey, how do we get the females in that house buying, and potentially their kids?
Yeah, I mean, and also this is a very tech-heavy or tech-forward audience. Emerging channels to activate within could be something that is of value to brands like this.
Sounds good. So as clients get exposure to, hey, let's get a little bit more information on my customers using third-party data. One of the questions we often get is, well, is it worth it to bring it in? Why should I as a brand invest in bringing in incremental data into my own house? What's interesting, I think we can see, is when you start to get a glimpse of the data that can be added to help build out and make that profile and that understanding of your customer set so much more robust. Really, to be able to have the capability to do that at your own fingertips within your own environments is probably the biggest advantage, and why customers tend to do it. Their main goal being understanding their customer set better, but that's slicing and dicing customers however they choose to do that in any given moment, whether that be lapsed customers, whether that be recent buyers, whether that be some sort of subsegment based on product mix. Having the data in-house enables brands to do that ad hoc, which again, obviously drives then the ability to do personalized communication, segment your existing customers, figure out how to improve or cross-sell better, and ultimately, improve the value of your first-party data and your interaction and your engagement with your own customers. So with that in mind, Greg, how do we start to work with clients to have them bring data in to complement their own first-party data?
Yeah, so what we've covered up to this point is the effectiveness to clean and to complete the data, as well as enrich it with these profiles and these deep dives as it relates to who their customer is. A lot of clients use those reports and those analyses to better inform how to bring that data in and what data points make the most sense from a data enhancement standpoint. In the case of this client here, we deal, and quite often we have a lot of QSR and restaurant style clients. They're looking to understand, by bringing this data in, how do they effectively identify and address their loyal versus non-loyal customers. And so you can imagine it being, from a QSR that's more from a national footprint. This, by taking the data in, by effectively identifying these customers, both from a loyal and non-loyal standpoint, they can then segment it out. They can provide, effective marketing strategies to bring to market. I'm thinking of, an audience of a mom, if you will, that is as children of three or more in the household, potentially has a larger SUV or van of sorts in the driveway. And has a higher average order value than, say, a young professional that is in their early 30s, late 20s, that is going to be more in a metropolitan area. All these data points are on their customer file, help them effectively provide the type of offers that make the most sense, be able to relate, or rather communicate with their customers at a much higher level of relevance, and effectively provide offers that are a bit more strategic as it relates to menu items specifically, or even like a geographic component, like what's in season in one state may not be in another state, and things like that. And that's what they were able to do. And average order values did increase as a result.
That's great. I always find it interesting, as marketers, we tend to get caught up on emails and maids and those types of identifiers, but it's interesting how just an address can be so important as it relates to knowing where they live, which can help just be a simple way to personalize the content that gets sent to them. But a great example.
Yeah.
So why first-party and third-party data, and how can brands go from here? What are the next steps? What we would recommend is to do all of these things, find some partners that can really help you. That could be a third-party data provider, it could be your agency, or it could be your own research. But start there and really do that evaluation of your first-party data. If nothing else, get that to be in the best possible shape as you can, because that's going to power so many things for your marketing activity. Then see how I'd investigate third-party data. A profile can be done as a pretty low-level lift, both in terms of expense as well as those delightful contracts. So look into that, and then see how that type of data can be brought into the environment to, again, improve your marketing effectiveness and how things go. And feel free to reach out. We work with a lot of different clients, and we're happy to provide a profile. So with that, Marissa, I'm hoping we have some questions.
We do. Well, first, thank you so much, Gillian. Thank you, Greg. Great presentation, such great information. And I especially liked how much you talked about the importance of really identifying the value of the complete view of the customer and also the importance of the data enhancements. I loved the examples you wove in as well. In fact, talking about the questions, our first question comes from a viewer who also thanked you for the great examples that you shared, and then also asked if there are any ROI or success metrics that you can share from these stories.
Sure. A couple we've seen. I'll be honest with you, some of our clients, we've asked for this, and they've been hesitant to share too many because they're worried, A, it's either proprietary, or B, that will increase their prices. Having said that, some things we have heard is that by bringing and cleaning their data, they've been able to identify more of their own customers more effectively, anywhere from 15 to 20%. On top of that, their own first-party models. So if they're doing their own modeling in their own environment, the performance of those models has increased by 5 to 10%, which is pretty significant when you're trying to measure ROI of campaigns.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Besides marketing, which you talked about a lot, are there any other business functions that may find this data useful? Gillian, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, interesting. When I talked to a couple of Greg's counterparts who work across a lot of different clients, brands who I think had the most effect, they found these to be really great dashboards and insights that they can share with the executive team. Everybody really craves having a deeper understanding of who their customers are, all the way up to the C-suite. So that has proven to be effective, and in some cases has become part of standard reporting metrics on a quarterly basis that are shared with executive management, is one unique one. And then Greg, you may have a couple others that you'd add to that.
Yeah, specifically within financial services and insurance, we do a lot with like data science and the data engineering side of the house. And for them, specifically around the data enhancement side, they find tremendous value. And obviously, as Gillian alluded to, their own in-house modeling, their own predictiveness of their first-party data, and help to like further power that, as well as go to market with acquisition efforts. We see a lot of overlap there. And then anywhere where there's a parent company that serves quite a few child-based brands. I think of more like hotel companies that have different lines of hotels and appeal to different levels of customers. They can segment their data in that, and accordingly, and we can help provide insights at those different chain levels for them to get a greater understanding. We do that quite a bit, and it seems to be very popular.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing more about those other departments and functions. Greg, another one for you. We actually got quite a few questions, so I'm going to try to weave this all into one that revolve around internal involvement. So which departments are typically involved when signing a data partnership like what you've described today, and how long does the process take from cleaning to then enhancing the data?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So I think it's going to be very dependent on the type of engagement that we have with the client. We often see the marketing team, like either the CMO or some sort of VP level or director level of marketing involved. We also see, as I mentioned, the data science and engineering teams or even IT teams involved. And it really just depends on the type of client and the application that they have in place. But once we do identify that and we get the appropriate decision makers involved, as well as the appropriate contracts in place, you could, depending on the type of license or the type of engagement we have, it can be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks on average to completion.
No, that's helpful to understand. So our audience can have a frame of reference for the whole timeline there. We are going to take one more question today. Gillian, this one's for you. If I want to run a customer profile report like what you shared today, what's required to get this type of analysis?
It's actually pretty simple. Number one, it's sending us the customer data. And as part of that, we just have an evaluation agreement that is signed. And then we receive that and we can run the analysis and usually have it back within about 2 to 3 weeks, depending on how in depth we run it. So usually the lightest lift, which is always a good thing, but really gives a great sneak peek and be able to see, hey, what kind of value could this type of data bring to the business?
Well, wonderful. Well, Gillian and Greg, thank you both for being here. The content was fantastic. And thank you again for answering all of those questions from our audience. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Marissa. I
Yeah,
appreciate you
thank
guys
you.
having us.
So before we wrap up, I'm just going to take a moment to tell you what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for live analyst and tech talk webinars on our events page at emarketer.com/events. Don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, our daily podcast. And finally, please subscribe to our newsletters. Thank you all for joining us. And thanks again to Gillian, Greg, the team at Epsilon, and our eMarketer studio team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk.